Welcome to the Money Business Podcast. I'm Neal Regino.
I am Brian Weyman.
Today, we're going to talk about 401ks, but specifically pooled employer plans. So, the PEPs. Let's talk about 401ks first. So, when you're in a 401k as the employer, you pay for a third party administrator,
TPA.
a record keeper, and then you take on all the fiduciary responsibilities. So what that means is discrimination testing, filing the 5500. So first of all, to back up, depending on what company you're using, maybe it costs, what I see is usually between $2,000 and $3,000 to start up a plan, and then ongoing fees of about $2,000 a year on a brand new plan. On larger plans, obviously a lot more. And there is a company out there that I know of that keeps it very cheap. I don't want to give them a plug because I don't work with them, and I don't know much about them. But it's expensive. It obviously gives you a lot more oversight. It gives more options for the Department of Labor to come in, for the IRS to have access to you. So, and especially when you get over 100 employees, there's an audit that has to be done as well. And in my experience, audits cost anywhere from $10,000 to $30,000, right? So, what a pooled employer plan is in 2019, these were created from the Secure Act. And what it does is takes the fiduciary responsibility off of the plan sponsor and says the employer is no longer the plan sponsor. There is a pooled plan provider that now acts as the fiduciary. The benefit, especially if you have over 100 employees, is that you no longer are responsible for the total audit. So you don't have that fee. You don't have to be responsible for the 5,500. You no longer are responsible for keeping track of discrimination testing. From a cost perspective, because of economies of scale, it could significantly reduce your costs. Even on a startup, give you access to other pricing because of economies of scale, other investment options that maybe you wouldn't get the same pricing on just because of different levels that record keepers might have. So I know that's a lot to throw out at once. I'm very familiar with these plans. I actually run one, and I don't know if you have questions about it first before I keep going on it.
No, I don't have questions. You've made me familiar with these. You know more about these than I do because it's more of your space. But I find it interesting that these things that you're talking about. Like number one, a very basic thing is, surprisingly, is that a lot of business owners, especially smaller business owners, they don't realize that they're the fiduciary.
Mm-hmm.
They don't even know what that means.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a big thing, right? So let's talk a little bit about why that's important.
I came in on a plan once where a employer was closing down a 401k because he no longer wanted to pay the match that he was paying and just said, let me close it down. He didn't terminate it correctly. The third-party administrator record keeper, he thought it was their responsibility to close it correctly. Little did he know, I brought in a third-party administrator who ultimately said he had to talk to an ERISA attorney to get everything settled, but he potentially could have been penalized per day for not offering this to his employees because it wasn't terminated properly. I don't know the full details, but the fact of the matter is it had been 2 years that it wasn't closed down. He wasn't paying in the actual contribution, and he didn't realize it was all on him. It had nothing to do with even if the third-party administrator messed up, even if the record keeper messed up, he ultimately was responsible for it. So, first of all, I just want to say in Pennsylvania and New Jersey, where both of us work primarily because my main office is in Pennsylvania, Brian's is in New Jersey, both states require some level of having a retirement plan if you own a business. There's different limits, depends on how big you are, depends on the time frame of when you have to get it set up. In Pennsylvania, there's a Pennsylvania state plan that's offered that people have a certain amount of time before they have to enroll in it if they're not offering a 401k themselves. So the trend is that the states and the federal government really want you to have them, to offer this to your employee, really to take the burden off of your uh, the actual government programs, right? So it used to be that there were pension plans, and they've kind of switched that burden off of the employer to offer a pension plan and said, okay, we have these 401ks. It's up to the employee to start contributing to their own assets, and then they actually have to contribute to their retirement. The pooled employer plan is such a good option if you have access to it. There's no barriers to entry anymore, like a what used to be a multi-employer plan, a MEP, where you all have to have something in common. So if you have access to white label underneath an existing one, if you have multi-employers that maybe you already have a MEP, switching to a PEP makes a lot of sense in a lot of cases. Takes a lot of administrative headaches off of the actual company.
Yeah, I would think that the simple, I mean, for starters, the fiduciary responsibility being lifted, that burden off that business owner is huge. To me, that's a huge selling point of why somebody would want to go to a PEP. But what do you think, as far as you're familiar with, like what PEOs did, right? So in a PEO, a pooled employee organization where everybody's going in on the same health care, a lot of these PEOs offered group 401k plans and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
Is it fair to say that now that a PEP is in existence, that you don't really need to worry about being part of a PEO? Not knocking PEOs, whether they're good or bad, that's up to the business owner if it fits for them. But is that just an easier way for these smaller groups that can't really get involved in a PEO to go to a PEP? Is that a better option?
Yeah, so PEOs typically, they may offer 401k, but PEOs typically are
Healthcare, but some of the bigger ones offered 401k.
okay. So we actually, it's fine. We'll dive into this. You and I actually are advisors for PEO,
Yeah,
and
I know.
and they do payroll, they do insurance, PNC insurance, they do taxes, they do employee benefits. They also offer a multi-employer plan 401k. For them, doing payroll and also being the plan sponsor is a big burden because they have to get all the documentation to a third-party administrator. They have to be responsible for discrimination testing, for corrective distributions, for a lot of things that they don't make money on. They don't make money on the MEP. It's just a thing that they offer as a value add to their employees or to their clients in the PEO. So we introduced the PEP model to them, and they, after a long time of looking at it, exploring different options, they decided that it made more sense. It saved them a lot of money, took the fiduciary burden away from them, and also takes away a lot of the administrative burden. And on top of that, they're no longer responsible for that audit fee. Now the pooled employer plan is, and it's prorated. And you could even set it up where, and this is a little inside baseball, you can set it up where the plan has an expense budget account that actually pays for the audit. So it's not necessarily something that the employers see on their plan. They just see it as part of the expense on the plan that's taken in total expenses. So a lot of reasons why it makes a lot of sense. The actual cost for, depending on how big the PEP is, depending how many employers are in there, who the record keeper is, you can get pricing that is significantly reduced versus doing even a startup on your own. Now, PEPs are really designed, I think, for the mid-size plans that have over 100 employees. But if you have enough scale in there, adding in the smaller employer plans, the startups, if it makes sense, can also save them a lot of money as well and a lot of headaches, especially if they're going to grow fast. So if you have even, you have a 100-person plus employer and they're in New Jersey or Pennsylvania, and they have to start offering a plan to their employees. Now it's a startup, but they already have the audit on day one. So using the PEP and having that that fiduciary responsibility and that administrative burden off of their plate makes a lot of sense even for them when it's a startup.
Right. So whether it's a startup or they're in a PEO, a PEP is now an advantage.
Yep.
That they didn't have before.
Yeah, for sure. And we've actually seen it while we were looking at this space. A lot of MEPs are moving to PEP. So, so there's a big opportunity there for if there's anybody who gets a hold of this podcast and thinks they're this YouTube video, whatever it is, and they say, hey, we run a MEP. Well, you might want to have a conversation with somebody like us to say, does it make sense to move to a PEP? And, you know, the thing that the several different companies that I talked to about this, their response is, why wouldn't we do this?
Right.
And the big thing is you lose control in some ways, but the benefit versus the cost to every one of them that I've had this conversation with, they're just like, yeah, I don't see why we wouldn't do this.
Why anybody would want that additional weight on their shoulders.
Yeah. And, you know,
Be rare.
the one thing that they say to me is, well, why didn't we ever explore this before? Why didn't anyone bring this up before? And I tell them it hasn't been around that long. And even though it started in 2019, it's really the last 3 years we've seen a big transition into this space. So, and, you know, even the companies try to figure out how to price them. That takes a while to figure out how they're going to make money on it, and also still being competitive with the rest of the industry. And there's a couple of firms out there that are extremely competitive compared to other companies. So,
So the moral of the story is if you own a business, small or mid-size, or I guess even large, and you're not familiar with pooled employee plans, PEPs, maybe time to investigate that because you could be making life easier and saving some money.
yep. Anyway,
At the end of the day, that's the plan.
yeah. If you have any questions, then I would say look us up, evolutionfg.com, and you can reach out to us there.
All right?
All right.
So I'm Brian Weyman,
I'm Neal Regino.
and thanks for coming. We hope this helped.
Thanks.